So we doing it on time. Amen. 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 We're going to have a scripture and a prayer, and then that we will be blessed by a selection, and then we'll go on in the program. Pastor Harder, if you would.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. It's so good to see you all here this evening. I'm so glad that you all could make time in your busy day to be here with us this afternoon, this evening. I'd like to read from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Sister Amira, would you come and lead us in prayer at this time, please?
Good evening. Now, I have to make a disclaimer. I only know how to pray in Spanish. Is that okay? Padre, te damos gracias, Señor amado, por todo lo bueno que tú has hecho por nosotros. Exaltamos tu santo nombre y bendecimos, Señor, este día que tú nos has dado. Padre, en este momento yo pido de tu unción para las personas que a continuación van a hablar. Y te pido que tu gran bendición sea derramada no solamente en ellos, sino en cada persona que está en este lugar. Te pido que tu unción y la unción del Espíritu Santo sea derramada sobre cada uno de nosotros y que en tu nombre, Señor, podamos realizar todas esas cosas a las cuales tú nos has llamado. And on this moment, Father, I pray for the blessing, for the comfort, and for your guidance, O Lord. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Sister Pamela, will you come and bless us with some music? Where are you? Come on.
Number 4, sir. How sweet to hold a newborn baby and feel the pride, all the joy he brings. But greater still, the calm assurance we can face uncertain days because he lives, because trust because he lives. And then one day I must cross this old river. I will fight life's final war with pain. And this day gives way to victory. I will see the lights of glory, and I know my Savior reigns because he lives. I can face tomorrow because he lives. All fear is gone because I know he holds my future, and life is worth the living. My life is worth the living. Our life is worth the living, just because my Savior lives. Hallelujah.
Because he lives. Amen? Amen. Amen. Take me down a little bit, Carl, if you would. Just because he lives, we can face tomorrow. We have a special presentation from you. Brother Gerald Norwood, who is our historian here at Progressive, who loves history and dives deep into history. He's got something he wants to come and share with you all on today. Brother Gerald Norwood.
Good evening. In the year 1968, for the first 3 months and 3 days, Dr. King did just a handful of speeches. The one that you're most familiar with is one that he delivered the day before his assassination at Mason Temple. I've been to the mountaintop. One that you're least possibly familiar with is one that he did his last sermon on Sunday, that he did to the Washington National Cathedral. I would like to speak to you today and share with you another speech that may make you more closer to him than you may have ever thought. It is a speech that he did closer to home to us, and I will tell you a little about it. The year is 1968. It would prove to be the last leg of a lifelong race for civil rights by the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His finish line would be in Memphis, Tennessee, helping the local sanitation workers seek equal wages, equal rights, and safe working conditions. He began the last year of his public speaking life over 50 years ago here in Kansas. In fact, it was Manhattan, Kansas, January the 19th, 1968. Invited to respond to the Kansas State University Convocation Series, Dr. King accepted and started the year revealing his ambitious plans for the year to change social justice injustices, preventing African Americans and minorities from achieving equality in all areas of American life. As a leader of and president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, you will hear in his own words this evening, the world to be similar to it is in 2018, a world full of fears, a world full of hope, and full of faith of a better world. In his speech, The Future of Integration, he speaks of the national priorities out of touch, the importance of American youth involvement in changing social ills, and the value of helping all citizens achieve the American dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This less-known Kansas State University speech was unearthed through an initiative of myself and Dr. Galen Vesey of Wichita. Myself, as a collector of African-American history, I acquired the original audio reel-to-reel recording from Dr. Vesey, who acquired it from a local radio station, KFH, in Wichita at the time the speech was aired. I contacted the head of the Special Collections of Kansas State University in 2011, offering to the university the recording if they would convert it to a digital format. In addition, I made available to them an original obsequies, a funeral program of Dr. King that was held in Atlanta, Georgia, from my own personal collection. Unbeknown to me, the original university recording had been destroyed in a fire. Between the time Dr. King spoke and the time I contacted them, it was a miracle, serendipitous event that these relationships came together. This evening, you will hear excerpts from Dr. King's January the 19th, 1968 Kansas speech. You will get a sense of Dr. King's vision of 1968, his concerns, his focus, and even his opinion on the role that the state of Kansas should play in social justice. We must learn to live as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. We are tied together in a single garment of destiny, caught in the inescapable network of mutuality. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is from his last sermon of the Washington National Cathedral, March the 31st, 1968.
Live from our Hearn Field House on the campus of Kansas State University in Manhattan, the K-State Radio Network presents an address by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., speaking in the University Convocation Series.
Now, there's need for civil rights legislation all over our country in various areas. The economic area, still in the educational area, and in the housing area. There's a great problem facing our nation today, and we see it in almost every city in the country. It is the constant growth of predominantly Negro-central cities, ringed by white suburbs. And if the pattern continues, it will invite social disaster. Now, the only way this problem is going to be solved is through strong, fair housing deals. Right here in the state of Kansas, this issue is being dealt with, and there are still recalcitrant forces seeking to defeat a fair housing bill which the state desperately needs. And I'm so happy that George Hill and others are working with determination to bring this into being, because the state of Kansas, like every state in this union, needs a fair housing deal that will make it possible for all people to live together and not face discrimination in housing. These are things that are necessary. Time is passing. I wish I had time to outline some of the things that we are planning to do in our own organization to try to grapple with the economic problem in a program in Washington. Suffice it to say, the problems are real. And if we are to go this additional distance, we've got to work passionately and unrelentingly. There are certain technical words in every academic discipline that soon become stereotypes and cliches. Every academic discipline has its technical nomenclature. And modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjusted. This is the ringing cry of the child psychologist, and certainly we all want to avoid the maladjusted life in order to avoid personalities. But there are some things in our society and in our world to which I'm proud to be maladjusted, which I call upon all men of goodwill to be maladjusted until the good society is realized. I never intend to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. But in a day when Sputniks and explorers and Geminis are dashing throughout space and guided ballistic missiles are carving highways of death through the stratosphere, no nation can ultimately win a war. It is no longer the choice between violence and non-violence. It is either non-violence or non-existence, and the alternative to disarmament, the alternative to a greater suspension of nuclear tests, the alternative to strengthening the United Nations and thereby disarming the whole world, may well be a civilization plunged into the abyss of annihilation, and our earthly habitat will be transformed into an inferno that even the mind of Dante could not envision. And so maybe our world is in dire need of a new organization, the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment, men and women who will be as maladjusted as the prophet Amos, who in the midst of the injustices of his days, crowd in words that echo across the centuries, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream, as maladjusted as Abraham Lincoln, who in the midst of his vacillations finally came to see that this nation could not survive half slave and half free, as maladjusted as Thomas Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery. But as across the pages of history, words lifted to cosmic proportions, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these a life lived in the pursuit of happiness, as maladjusted as Jesus of Nazareth, who could say in the midst of the military machinery of the Roman Empire, he who lives by the sword will perish by the sword, and through such maladjustment, we will be able to emerge from the bleak and desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man into the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice. Now I must admit that there are times that I get rather discouraged in the midst of setbacks, in the midst of what I see as the constant vacillations and ambivalences of American white society. And there are times that some of us begin to wonder whether this problem can be solved. But ever and again I get out and I get around the colleges and universities of our country, and I get to talk with many of the young people, and I must honestly say to you that my hope is always renewed in those settings. I think that you who sit today under the sound of my voice may well have the answer. For it's the student generation that's saying to America that there must be a radical reordering of priorities. It's the student generation that's saying to America there must be a revolution of values, and forcing America to review its values. President Johnson, in his State of the Union message, wondered why there is so much restlessness. He talked about the material prosperity. He talked about the highways and the beautiful cars flowing on those highways, the rolling down. He talked about the 70 million television sets, and then he wanted to know why there is so much restlessness. I would like to answer the president by saying there's restlessness in this society because we have allowed the means by which we live to outdistance the ends for which we live. That is restlessness in the society. young people are restless because they are tired of killing. They want to say make love, not war. Young people are restless today because they are tired of the prophecies that are unfolding. And so the trouble is that our national purpose, our national priorities are being questioned. And I see the hope within the young people of our generation. I conclude by saying our goal is freedom. And I believe we're going to get there because however much he strays away from it, the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned, though we may be as a people, our destiny somehow is tied up with the destiny of America. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before Jefferson wrote the beautiful words that I just mentioned from the Declaration of Independence, we were here. Before the beautiful words of the Star-Spangled Banner were written, we were here. And for more than 2 centuries, our forebears labored here without wages. They made cotton king, and they built the homes of their masters in the midst of the most humiliating and oppressive conditions. And yet out of a boundless vitality, they continue to grow and develop. And if the inexpressible cruelties of slavery couldn't stop us, the opposition that we now face, including the white backlash, will surely fail. We're going to win our freedom. We're going to win our freedom because both the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of the Almighty God are embodied in our echoing demands. And so I can still sing, we shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right, no lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Carl Bryant is right, truth crushed earth will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right, truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children all over this nation, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
It's good to see you all here tonight. My name is Alan Stuckey. I'm the pastor at the First Church of the Brethren here in town. And I have often thought that I have been given the opportunity to know people and to be in certain situations that I have no right to earn on my own other than the grace of God. And I count tonight as one of those, and I count all of you among those people who I consider it an honor to be in your presence. I'm also deeply grateful for Brother Norman and what he shared tonight. Particularly, I am grateful for his history, for his understanding, and also for the depth of the history of all of our elders who have lived through times that I can only imagine. Also tonight, we're going to be hearing from someone who is on the list of people who I have no right to really know because they're just plain smarter than I am. Joanna Shenk is someone who I had the great opportunity to go to seminary with a few years ago. She is also the pastor at First Mennonite Church in San Francisco and has done all sorts of amazing things, including being the producer of the Iconocast podcast, writer, networker, activist, and educator. She's also written a couple of books, including Widening the Circle and The Movement Harding was a close personal friend of Martin Luther King Jr. And was involved with shaping the movement, as well as Dr. Harding was closely involved with writing the Beyond Vietnam speech, given exactly 51 years today, to the day today. Tonight, Joanna is going to share with us a little bit about that interview and about her relationship and learnings from Dr. Harding, particularly about his involvement in the movement and with Dr. King. But she also intends to bring a word tonight to us about continuing that movement, and in particular, the New Poor People's Campaign. The original Poor People's Campaign was something that got going right at the end of Dr. King's life and is being revived, which I think is particularly important for us tonight. Brother Norwood, you made the mention that Dr. King's speech you just played sounds very timely to us. In the last few years, in more than the last few years, I've often wondered, what would I have done if I was alive during the 60s? I'm not old enough to have been around during that time, but I always thought, well, what would I have done? The thought in the last couple of years for me, looking at how history was repeating itself, challenges that we face, my thought is, well, what I'm doing now is probably about what I would have done, whether I like that or not. I think we have an opportunity tonight to remember Dr. King's legacy, to remember the events of 50 years ago, but also to be inspired for what we can do tonight. After Joanna speaks, there are also going to be some other people who will share about the Poor People's Campaign, and then there will be a question and answer time with everyone involved. So would you join me now in welcoming Pastor Joanna Shenk.
It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Thank you, Pastor, for welcoming me into your congregation, and to the whole group, the planning group, for inviting me to have the honor of speaking with you this evening about Dr. King's legacy and how we carry on the movement to which he was passionately committed. And also want to thank you, Brother Norwood, for that speech, bringing the background. It's powerful to hear King speak. He was an orator that no one really could compare to, and I think that we need to continue to claim our voice and to speak powerfully about what we need in our country today, and I think he is someone that we can all be aspiring towards in terms of speaking with power and speaking with conviction about what the world needs. It is also my honor to bring the wisdom of Dr. Vincent Harding, who was a friend and a colleague of Dr. King's. In his book, Martin Luther King, The Inconvenient Hero, he writes how honoring King is to remember why he was assassinated. It was not for his "I have a dream" speech. It was for his opposition to the war in Vietnam and for his critique of our economically unjust capitalist economy. We heard him talk about the right to housing. We'll think more about that a little bit later. Let us not make King a convenient hero that we can praise, but really sit with his inconvenient and uncomfortable challenges. Poet Carl Wendell Hines hit the nail on the head with his poem. He wrote, "Now that he is safely dead, let us praise him. Build monuments to his glory, sing hosannas to his name. Dead men make such convenient heroes. They cannot rise to challenge the images we would fashion from their lives. And besides, it is easier to build monuments than to make a better world." This evening, I want to talk about what it means for us to make a better world. It is not something we can do alone as individuals or as individual congregations. Building a better world is not about those of us with means helping people who are downtrodden. Building a better world is about our own liberation and the transformation of the world. In the Beyond Vietnam speech that was penned by Dr. Harding, Harding and delivered by Dr. King 51 years ago today. He said, "On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring." This restructuring is what it needs to make a better world. The question is, where do we begin? I believe that Dr. Vincent Harding has wisdom to aid us in this work. But before we jump into those specifics, I want to introduce you to my mentor, elder, and friend. How is it that the person who created and defined the field of Black studies and drafted Dr. King's prophetic Beyond Vietnam speech needs an introduction, even in movement circles today? How is it that this friend of Martin and a magnificent historian, teacher, and movement elder maintains such a seemingly low profile? Perhaps it is because he was following the example of his teacher, Ella Baker, who only recently is widely recognized for her enduring contributions to movements for justice. And if you don't know about Ella Baker, that's one homework assignment. Google her after we finish this evening. Perhaps it is because he knew by whom he wanted to be recognized, and that did not include vast public audiences. Perhaps that was the point. He knew the toll it took to be a public figure as he walked alongside Dr. King. He chose a different path that allowed him to cultivate friendships across many lines of difference and curate conversations that took him down off the stage. And if he was here this evening, I wouldn't be surprised if he would walk down and be talking from that microphone right there. He always wanted to be on the same level as everybody else and in conversation and dialogue. He did not diminish those who shouldered the task of notoriety, and arguably he had some of his own, but that was not his goal. He was clear on his specific calling. In 2011, he described part of it like this: to help people take all the risks that are involved in getting to a kind of familial relationship across racial lines, to get messy and connected and involved and angry and sorrowful and everything else that deeply engaged people are supposed to get. And this is a great quote too. I'm glad that it's up on the screen. Thank you for sharing that. In every public venue where I heard him speak, he embodied this calling, inviting people into conversation with each other and with him. He asked each person to begin so when he would be speaking to a group this size, or a group of 20 people, or a group of 1,000 people, if anyone came up to the microphone, before they asked him a question or started a conversation, he would say, "Now, first tell me, what is your full name, and where did you grow up? And also, what is your mama's full name, and where did she grow up?" And he was insistent, even in these large groups, people would just be ready with their questions. He's like, no, what is your full name? What's your mama's full name? And so he was asking, who are you? Whose are you? Where are your people from? That was the foundation for connection. Everyone has a people and a place. And these stories are messy and complicated. Not everyone knows their mama's mama or visited the place where she grew up. Some families carry a lot of pain. Some have been pushed around and pulled apart. These were all important aspects of the story for Uncle Vincent, as many young people, including myself, were invited to call him. He encouraged people to know each other in the complexity of their stories, to recognize the parallels and resonances, to honor each other's stories in all their tremendous beauty and devastating pain. In 1961, Vincent Harding and his spouse, Rosemary Freeney Harding, moved to Atlanta to join the civil rights movement through the founding of Mennonite House. However, Dr. Harding was adamantly opposed to the use of that title for the movement. He referred to that phrase as the product of lazy journalists. Instead, he called it some variation of the Black-led movement for the deepening and broadening of democracy in this country. Other times he used the more widely known title of the Southern Freedom Movement. The Mennonite House experiment in Atlanta, which was, again, why he moved to the South the first time, was funded by Mennonite institutions. Young people, both black and white, came to live at the house and volunteer with movement organizations in Atlanta, like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Mennonite House was a place of hospitality for movement veterans as well, that were in need of respite, like Fannie Lou Hamer and Septima Clark, among others. It was the first interracial community living effort in Atlanta, and it was just around the corner from where Coretta Scott and Martin Luther King Jr. lived at that time. Rosemary and Vincent and Coretta and Martin were friends. Sometimes the Hardings would babysit the King's children while they were traveling. In addition to facilitating Mennonite House, the Hardings served the movement by reaching out to white people who wanted to get involved. Andy Young, who was on staff with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, thought that they would be less threatening since they were Mennonites and not officially connected to any of the movement organizations. Before moving to Atlanta, the Hardings were involved in Mennonite congregations in Chicago. While working on his master's degree in history at the University of Chicago, Dr. Harding, well, he wasn't quite Dr. Harding at that point, but he learned about the historical Anabaptist movement and then met a few Mennonites. Soon after, he was asked to join the pastoral staff of Woodlawn Mennonite Church, a congregation of black and white people located on the south side of Chicago's downtown. In 1958, Harding and 4 other men from Woodlawn, their church, took a trip through the South to learn about the Southern Freedom Movement. Their group was made up of 2 black men and 3 white men. None of them had spent time in the South before. This was when Harding first met Dr. King and received an invitation directly from him to come south and join the movement. And in a nutshell, King was living in Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama at the time. He was home in bed recovering from a stab wound that he had received on a book tour. And so the group of guys that were driving, they called up their house when they hadn't quite made it to Montgomery and said, talked with Coretta, said, would it be okay if we stop by? And she's like, I'm not sure how he will feel, but you know, feel free to come on over and we'll see. And he was awake and energized to meet with them. And Dr. Harding described it as they were in his bedroom, and Dr. Harding was actually sitting on the edge of the bed, and King was in his pajamas in bed, and just like in great spirits and laughing, like congratulating them for making it through Mississippi alive. And it was at the end of that time that he looked at Vincent Harding and at Ed Riddick, who was the other black man, and specifically said to them, but I think to all 5 of them, you're Mennonites, you know about nonviolence, you need to come down here and join the movement. So soon after Rosemary and Vincent met in 1958, they realized that they wanted to be life partners and become involved in the Southern Freedom Movement as a couple. This calling was the impetus for the creation of Mennonite House, where they lived and worked from 1961 to 1964. In 1964, they moved back to Chicago so that Vincent Harding could finish his doctoral degree in history at the University of Chicago. He told me when I interviewed him that for some reason he thought, while running Mennonite House and being a movement organizer, he'd be able to write his dissertation, but turns out that was impossible. So they went back to Chicago so he could finish it. So while he was finishing, he was invited by Spelman College to come back to Atlanta and chair the history department. That's the historic black women's college. So in 1965, they moved back to Atlanta. A little over a year later, he was asked to draft the Beyond Vietnam speech during Christmas break from teaching, because he said Dr. King thought that professors had more time to write than movement organizers. So King knew that they were of the same mind about the war in Vietnam, and he also knew that Dr. Harding understood his pastoral concerns for the nation. In his book, The Inconvenient Hero, he writes about the pressure that King was under when he delivered the speech. He was not riding high on the successes of the movement. Rather, he was criticized from different sides for being too radical by expanding beyond issues of race, and not being radical enough because he was still committed to nonviolence and not talking enough about black power. King knew that this speech was not going to make him more popular. Writing the Beyond Vietnam speech was a significant contribution, and it was also Vincent Harding offering his gifts to the movement. He believed then and throughout his life that movements for justice are not made by their spokespersons or public figures, but by everyone offering their gifts and committing for the long haul. The movement places King in his context, Uncle Vincent told me. He was created by the movement, speaking of King, he said, he was created by the movement, and he also created parts of the movement. The movement teaches us what it means to be human. Following King's assassination, Dr. Harding was asked by Coretta Scott King to become the first director of the King Memorial Center in Atlanta. Soon after accepting that role, he also founded the Institute of the Black World, an organization committed to creating and defining the field of Black studies. That's huge. Like, how do we not know about this guy? Like, it was the first time that Black intellectuals, historians, artists, activists were coming together and defining what it meant to be Black in America. And Vincent Harding was right at the center of that. Beginning in the 1980s, he spent the rest of his teaching career in Denver, Colorado at the Iliff School of Theology, and continued to travel and connect with groups all over the country and all over the world. He's the author of multiple books, including There is a River, The Black Struggle for Freedom in America, a powerful telling of the resistance of African peoples to enslavement beginning on the shores of the African continent and through the Black Power period. The book came out in, I think, 1980. That was his first book. That his niece told me, who was his assistant at the time, that he wrote, worked on at Ella Baker's house. Ella Baker was gone, but said he could use her house for writing, and his niece Gloria said that he, at times, would just weep and weep and weep and could not be consoled as he was writing that book. I mentioned also The Inconvenient Hero, which is a poetic reflection on his friend Martin and the way King's legacy has been altered to uphold the very realities he was assassinated for opposing. And also Hope in History, Why We Must Share the Story of the Movement, which is a call to educators and activists to remember the lessons of the Southern Freedom Movement as we seek societal transformation today. In the 1980s, he was senior advisor for the 14-hour PBS television series Eyes on the Prize. Up until his untimely death in 2014, he maintained a full travel schedule, speaking with educators at the Free Minds, Free Peoples Conference, walking alongside Palestinians experiencing occupation in the West Bank, teaching as a visiting professor at Morehouse College in Atlanta, and engaging with progressive Christians at the Wild Goose Festival in North Carolina. On November 10, 2016, 2 days after the United States elected Donald Trump the 45th president, and 2.5 years after Uncle Vincent had transitioned to be with the ancestors, Krista Tippett of NPR's On Being podcast chose to re-release her conversation with him. She said, in an unsettled political moment at the end of a divisive campaign, the late, great civil rights elder Vincent Harding is a voice of calm, wisdom, and perspective. Would Dr. Harding be deterred by the sober realities we're facing today? I do not think so. I think he would be grieved and angry at times, but not despairing. As a historian, he was intimately knowledgeable about the capacity of white supremacy to terrorize and devastate vulnerable populations. His vision for a just society was not unfounded optimism. No, it was rooted in the capacity of his ancestors to survive the most barbaric realities and to do so while loving and nurturing each other, singing together and dancing towards freedom. He steadfastly believed that just as Black people led a movement that liberated the country in the 50s and 60s, we are carrying forward the mantle of liberation today. He believed that revolutionary transformation of ourselves and our society was possible as people recognized their self-governing gifts as individuals and communities. The first step to making this possible was knowing one's story. So each conversation began. What is your full name and where did you grow up? What is your mama's full name Where did she grow up? That is the first lesson I want to highlight from Dr. Harding. We must know where we've come from. This lack of knowing and its effects are stunningly articulated in the rise of white supremacy in the United States today. In its inhumanity, white supremacy has stripped away the cultural and ethnic histories of people now considered white, which includes me. It has erased their ancestral wisdom and cut them off from knowing their origin stories while offering the lie of superiority in exchange. How different of a conversation it would be if the white supremacists who are emboldened to gather publicly were angry at white supremacy for cutting them off from their ethnic heritage and ancestral wisdom. As they chant, "You will not replace us," their confusion screams, "We have been dehumanized by trading our histories for white supremacy. We don't know who we are." Deep pain and insecurity are unveiled when people act out in these ways. Some are called to speak to that pain and come alongside white people who are misdirecting their rage. Others are called to organize and mobilize people to protect those who are targeted by hate and confront the violence directly. All are called to learn as much as possible about their histories and ethnicities, whether we are people of color or white, so that white supremacy cannot define us. The second lesson Dr. Harding offers us is the need to look at root causes of violence and oppression, which, since I'm in a church, can also be called sin. If you've ever read or listened to the Beyond Vietnam speech, you know that its whole point, and I know that some folks were just listening to it before coming here at an event in a park. The whole point of that speech was to look at the root causes of the war in Vietnam and how it was connected to the war on the poor in the United States, and to call this country to its highest ideals. It is clear that a historian wrote the speech, given his detailed telling of the history of colonization in Vietnam and the very legitimate reasons why the Vietnamese people would be opposed to U.S. intervention. Harding was asked to write the speech, as I mentioned, because of his historical knowledge, his awareness of what was happening on the ground in Vietnam, his pastoral orientation, and interestingly, because of a meeting that never happened between Dr. King and the ambassador to the UN, Arthur Goldberg. Dr. Harding described it in this way. He said, "Another important piece to understand is that President Johnson got in touch with Andy Young, who is with SCLC, and suggested that Martin sit with Arthur Goldberg, ambassador to the United Nations, to set him straight on Vietnam. Andy and Martin asked me to write the talking points for this conversation. The conversation never happened, but because of the talking points, I was asked to write the Riverside speech. After I finished it, Martin had 3 or 4 other people look it over to get a sense of what might be thrown back at him. He also added a few of his own words. A few months after the speech, Martin called me up and he said, 'Vincent, you see what kind of trouble you got me into?' In the speech, Dr. King talked about the root causes of militarism, extreme materialism born out of the capitalist economic order, and racism. He said, 'I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values.' And I'm sure many of you could say this quote with me. 'We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers,' and I'm from the Bay Area, so I know about computers and tech companies. So when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered.' How would you describe the root causes of injustice here in Wichita, in Kansas? It was really interesting to hear Dr. King also speak with specificity about Kansas. In Christian terms, we can say, what is the body of death from which you and your congregations and communities need liberation? Where is it that people are working to address these realities? Vincent Harding believed it was the work of communities to do this discernment and organizing together. He saw his role as inviting people into this work, rather than looking to him or others as an authority or answer man. I experienced this firsthand when I hosted him for a week of speaking engagements in northern Indiana in, I think it was the beginning of 2012. I was driving him to my seminary, where he was going to be talking with seminary students and professors in the community, and this was over MLK weekend and week. And he said, Joanna, what is it that you would be interested for me to speak on today? And I said, well, Dr. Harding, we're just so grateful that you're here and really, open to whatever wisdom you have to share with us. I just really trust that whatever, you think is fitting will, be what we need to hear. And he paused for a moment, and then in his slow, deliberate way of talking, he looked at me. I was driving, so I couldn't quite, hold eye contact, but he was like, Joanna, this is your community. You know what your community needs to hear, so I want you to tell me what I should talk about today. And I was like, okay. And then I had things to say because I was active in my community. I was doing organizing. I did know the history of that place, and I did have something to say, but it was like I needed him. Well, in that situation, I was just so given over to well, he's this amazing person, so what do I have to say? But the way that he was as a teacher, his pedagogy was always, everyone has something to say, everyone has something to contribute, and what we're trying to get to is a place where everyone in society feels that kind of empowerment to work for the change that we need and to be thinking together with their community about how we bring that about. So this story also lends itself to the last lesson that I want to share this evening. Dr. Harding was always wanting people to connect across lines of difference and saw that as key to the transformation of society. And what he would say, and what I say too, looking out at this audience, is you all are looking great tonight. Really a beautiful group of people to be having this conversation with. So Dr. Harding, with his life, modeled this in so many ways, connecting across lines of difference. Through his work as a pastor of a biracial congregation in Chicago, as a leader along with Rosemary of Mennonite House in Atlanta, as a connecting point between the Southern Freedom Movement and white people in the South, as the founding director of the Institute of the Black World, as a friend to people of many different faith and spiritual traditions, and as a teacher and friend of people across generations. He loved talking with young people and connecting young people, talking with older people, and really thought we have to be together across the generations as we do this work. He was not afraid of the challenge that comes when making connections across lines of difference. He knew that that was precisely what created transformation. As he looked back on his formative experience among Mennonites in the 50s and 60s, a primarily white denomination at the time, and then his shift into movement work, he told me, I think that was a very important preparation for me to go south and for me to participate in all of the struggles and dialogues that grew out of the Black consciousness period. Remembering that I had this real connection to a community, the Mennonite community, where there was at least the potential of people really loving each other across racial lines, and where I had come to that point with some of my sisters and brothers where I could wrestle with them around these issues because we assumed a kind of familial relationship. And he went on, I know from that point on, that's always been one of my goals, and so this was the quote that I said earlier, that one of the things that I try to help others move towards, to take all the risks that are involved in getting to a kind of familial relationship with people across racial lines, to get messy and connected and involved and angry and sorrowful and everything else that deeply engaged people are supposed to get. And out of that, to try to figure out what integration means. And I would add liberation, to try to figure out what our liberation means. That is the point. And that's what he committed his life to. That's what Dr. King died for. And that is our calling today as people of faith and people committed to the transformation of our world. In 1966, King articulated his vision in this way. He said, "I choose to identify with the underprivileged. I choose to identify with the poor. I choose to give my life for the hungry. I choose to give my life for those who have been left out of the sunlight of opportunity. I choose to live for those who find themselves seeing life as a long, desolate corridor with no exit sign. This is the way I'm going. If it means suffering a little bit, I'm going that way. If it means sacrificing, I'm going that way. If it means dying for them, I'm going that way." A year later, in 1967, King talked about the power of this new and unsettling force. He was not just identifying with the underprivileged because that was the Christian thing to do. He was identifying with them because he saw them as the key to transforming our society. He knew the biblical text deeply and the story of Jesus, who was a poor person, living under occupation, and creating a movement of liberation with the dispossessed and for all people. King said, "The dispossessed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro," and of course there's many other identities we would include in that now, "live in a cruelly unjust society. They must organize a revolution against the injustice, not against the lives of persons who are their fellow citizens, but against the structures, the edifices, through which the society is refusing to take the means which have been called for and which are at hand to lift the load of poverty. There are millions of poor people in this country who have very little, if nothing, to lose. If they can be helped to take action, together they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life." And this, my friends, is our call to action. 50 years ago, Dr. King launched the Poor People's Campaign, his final organizing effort. It is being relaunched right here in Wichita and across the country. This was the campaign that set King directly in the crosshairs of the American empire as he dared to question the economic order of things, while also uniting people across racial lines. He was doing both things. And it was the collective power that King wielded through this campaign that made him such a powerful threat to the established order. He and others organized 3,000 poor people of all different races to come to the Washington Mall to live in Resurrection City for 6 weeks, demanding a reorientation of our nation's values. The platform of the Poor People's Campaign in 1968 called for 3 things: a $30 billion annual appropriation for a real war on poverty. $30 billion. Congressional passage of full employment and guaranteed income legislation. So full employment and a guaranteed annual wage. Lastly, the construction of 500,000 low-cost housing units per year until slums were eliminated. I'd say this is a great platform still today. So I'm thrilled that organizers with the Reignited Poor People's Campaign are here this evening and will share more about the movement today and ways we can get involved. Truly, Dr. King and Dr. Harding would want nothing more than our full support and participation in this revolutionary effort. In order to face the challenges and opposition of doing this revolutionary work, we need to know where we've come from. We need to know our histories of struggle and all that we've overcome to get here. We need to address violence and oppression at its roots, and especially doing this by listening and following the lead of those most affected by the injustices of our society. And lastly, we must work together across lines of difference, particularly the lines of difference that have been created by the racism and economic injustice of this country. Let us honor King as the inconvenient hero he was, and not shy away from his call to a radical revolution of values in this nation. Only then can we become the new and unsettling force this country needs. Joining this movement is what invites us into our deepest humanity. Joining the movement is what liberates us. Just as Black people led a movement that liberated this country in the 50s and 60s, we all have the capacity to carry forward the mantle of liberation today. Dr. Harding, Dr. King, and Linda Brown are among the great cloud of witnesses cheering us on. We are not alone. And in this season of Easter, we also know that death is not the end. The movement continues, and the Spirit empowers us to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. May it be so. Amen.
Pastor Joanna, thank you so much. We do have folks here locally who are organizing for the Poor People's Campaign. And at this time, I'd like to invite Brother Jarrell Gilmore and Pastor Titus James to come and share with us.
Thank you. Y'all ain't got to clap for me. As you heard, Dr. Vincent and Dr. King believed that the movement was where it was at. Vincent Harding, as you heard, who drafted the first draft of Dr. King's Beyond the Vietnam speech, said that he didn't move to the South only to join Dr. King, but to join a friend in a movement. Kansas is coming to this work. Wichita is coming to this work with that attitude and commitment that we are joining a movement. Vincent Harding said, "I am a citizen of a country that does not yet exist." In this movement, today, in 2018, we believe that we are citizens of a country that does not yet exist. And in our hearts are joining with you, committing to the task at hand. A part of that movement, part of this team, is Dr. Barber. Some of you know Reverend Dr. Barber and Reverend Dr. Theo Harris. And they are a part of this wonderful team that whose role is to hold this space open for all of us to step into. This is an opportunity for the leadership that has been residing in our states to move forward and in concert with one another. There's great and rich history in our elders. There's vibrant and enthusiastic energy in our youth. And that will energize our movement here in Wichita and throughout Kansas. Some of you know Wichita was where the first sit-in was, right, at Dockham, right? Kansas was also a catalyst in the movement. Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka. So the speech at K-State, Dr. King, as our brother said, is very timely. Right here in Wichita, people are without housing and affordable housing and fair access to affordable housing. Right here in Wichita, the Wichita government puts profit above people. And people are without access to healthy drinking water. Right here in Wichita, people live in slums or slum housing, right? And that's not unique to the rest of this country. So coming together, so bringing forward communities of people who have never been unified in such a large and conscious push forward. Coming together in Kansas on the 14th is happening in 3 locations. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about what's happening right here in Kansas. So on the 14th of this month, in Topeka, Kansas, in Manhattan, in Wichita, each of these hub cities is bringing together nearly 500 people who said they want to engage in civil disobedience. Nearly 1,000 who want to participate in 40 days of nonviolent moral fusion direct action. Each hub city has a team that is delivering on 3 components on the 14th. Delivery of the training itself and all that it requires. Nonviolent principles, the covenant to nonviolence, music, legal, logistics, and turnout. As you heard King say, that we must have a revolution of values. And he also was very committed to nonviolence, that nonviolence would disarm the militia of this world. So not just this country, but this world. And he spoke of 3 ills: militarism, poverty, and racism. And the new Poor People's Campaign, a call for a national call for a moral revival, speaks to the militarism or war economy, seeks to address poverty as it interlocks with militarism, seeks to address environmental degradation as it also interlocks with militarism and poverty, and seeks to address racism as it interlocks with those things. We are creating a space where anyone wanting to be involved in the 40 days of nonviolent moral fusion direct action can come and engage. The layout of the afternoon in our 3 cities, the first 45 minutes, people in the room will be singing together, introduce the campaign, and spending a little time of nonviolent principles, the first portion of our training curriculum. Then everyone will spend 30 minutes with Dr. Barber and Dr. Liz. Then we will go over the themes of outreach with the large group and think together about our post 14. So on the 14th, as I said, we'll be coming together to commit ourselves to being a part of this movement. Excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather, so sorry. But I'm very unapologetic about this one thing. That we cannot be passive observers any longer to what is happening to all of us in this country. We cannot be passive observers to the fact that 77% of youth in Kansas are youth of color, and 33% of those youth are black youth imprisoned in Kansas. We can no longer be passive observers. And as I heard King say, we must be maladjusted to these things. There is a fire. I remember a prophet said, I think his name was Jeremiah, that there's a fire in his bones. There's a fire burning in mine. And it will not leave me alone. It won't. I can't. And I am willing to walk with you. I am willing to sing with you. I am willing to sit with you, and I am willing to fight with you all to push this world and this country and to become citizens of a country that we know it could be. The one that doesn't exist yet. The one where we become more human than black or white people or Latino people. Sure, those things are important to our heritage, but when they're taught and given to us in the right way, But this is a house, a world house. And it's this country is a snapshot of the world. There are all beautiful people with talent. Ingenuity and creativity to give. And all of that is being stifled for profit. All of that is being stifled for material gain. So, a part of what we are embarking on again is you heard me say moral fusion, direct action. And you'll learn more of that on April 14th. But I want to tell you a little bit about what that means. Moral fusion, direct action. This country, and I have to say this country because as long as civil rights is an act, then I am still not a citizen of this country. Because it can be changed at any time. It can be taken off the books at any time. So this country is plagued by a distorted moral narrative. And we seek to embark upon a journey that will lift the narrative of those voices that live the truth of overcoming through love, that live the truth of brotherhood and sisterhood and family, but that also live the truth of what it is to be in this country and be poor, what it is to be in this country and be black, what it is to be in this country and work hard and be Latino, and be told that you don't belong to a land that you were born on. So moral fusion is about that moral narrative and also bringing art and music and culture into the movement. And we'll learn more about that. So one of the ways we do that is we sing together. So I want to, and the movement, again, it's about a movement. So Reverend Theo Harris, Dr. Barbara, and they have Yara is her name. I call her a psalmist. They call her a theomusicologist. I call her a psalmist. And she penned a song called Somebody's Hurting My Brother. And it's really simple. We'll learn it again on the 14th, but I wanted to share it with you just a little bit. I'm not sure whose water this is, but I'm going to take a drink. This movie about sharing. Somebody's hurting my brother, and he's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my children, and it's gone on far too long. And I won't be silent anymore. Somebody's poisoning our water, and it's gone on far too long. Somebody's pouring our water, and it's gone on for too long. Somebody's killing my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And I won't be silent anymore. Somebody's killing my sister because the hue of her skin, and it's gone on far too long. And I won't be silent anymore. In my hand, I hold the Poor People's Campaign, a National Call for a Moral Revival pledge card. This is a way that those who are helping organize this movement, myself at Sunflower Community Action, and others, Marcellus, my brother over there, can get in touch with you, and you can get in touch with us, and you can also join this movement. Is being passed out to you now. And I call you not to be silent anymore. I call you to lift your voice with me. I call you to stand with me. I call you to fight with me. I call you not to be a passive observer in the lives of our brothers and sisters and our own. So I'm not going to be like Paul and be long-winded, so I'm finna sit down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Gilmore, Brother Darrell Gilmore, thank you very much. I also love singing. I'm going to get another song going, and it just goes like this. I can't see the Lord, but I can feel him. I can't feel him. I can feel him. I can't see the Lord, but I can feel him. I can feel him all over me. Oh, I can't see the Lord, but I can feel him. I can feel him. I can feel him. I can't see the Lord, but I can feel him. I can feel him all over me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Well, I can't see the Lord, but I can feel him. I can feel him. I can feel him. Oh, I can't see the Lord, but I can feel him. I can feel him all over me. Amen. It's something about feeling the Lord, his mission, his call, his purpose. And the Poor People's Campaign gives me that sense of life, duty, and call. In fact, I believe we all have a chance to get a ticket to heaven if we just help God, help the poor people in our land. Because when we help the poor, we're doing God's work. Again, we know the Poor People's Campaign is a national call for moral revival. We are in a moral crisis in this country. In fact, the church may even be in a spiritual crisis because we are losing power like we're losing members. Somebody ought to say amen. Because the crisis is on us. The moral things in our nations are shrinking, even dying. What are we going to do about it? The Poor People's Campaign calls for us to take action in regards to the poor. We are called to really make an investment of our compassion and to give it to the community to increase the capacity for change. When we give ourselves, also our talents, our skills, our resources to advocate and fight for the poor, to change policy, legal policy, to change lives in our community, we help make a difference. And we are given a call to all who are able and willing and who care. Will you join this movement? We have that date, April 14th, starting 9 o'clock in the morning at Pine Valley Christian Church, right up there on 21st Street, by the Broadmoor. Or starts at noon, thank you very much, 12 o'clock at Pine Valley Christian Church. You can sleep in that morning. At Pine Valley Christian Church, right there on 21st near, what's that name? Well, anyway, 21st between Oliver and Woodland. Also, I want to just tell you something else. Getting a ticket to heaven is special by being a part of the Hopeless campaign, because in Matthew 25 and 40, the question is asked, and the king shall answer and say to them, verily I say unto you, as inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. Christ is saying at that time to the people who help the poor, who help the down and out, who help those who are in pain, who help those who are sick, who just did good to those who were needing the help. He said, you did it unto me. But he also challenged those who were not kind, who were not generous, who were not helpful, and said, you did not do it to me. I will cast you out of my kingdom. Depart from me. So what do you get to do to get to the kingdom? You got to do God's will. And part of God's will is being a part of this Poor People's Campaign. We have got to join our hearts and our hands to help bring about Martin Luther King's dream. Dr. King said this, and I just share some from Disciples Justice Action Network in my church. It says, the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of men. That's Dr. Martin Luther King. He has a dream that we were going to be a beloved community. And I wonder, when we say we don't even belong to this nation, or do we have a nation under God? Are really one people in these 50 states? Well, we should be trying to become the beloved community, where all are beloved and beloved all people. I want to just share one more word of inspiration that I received while listening to the sharing at McAdams Park this evening. As we commemorate Dr. King tonight, my spirit spoke and said, this is like Good Friday for the civil rights movement. Good Friday, when our leader, the head of the movement, was shot down by the crucifixion of a sniper's bullet. Oh, why have Good Friday? And I thought, Lord, how can we have a Good Friday? And this man was not Jesus. But my heart said, well, he was plotted against. They did give him kind of different labels. They called him a troublemaker. They called him an instigator. They called him a liar. They called him a deceiver. They did the same thing to Jesus. And I thought, well, he was a troublemaker in D.C. He did cause people to rise up and stand for their rights in the South. He did make a difference, but it cost his life. But I say this movement deserves an Easter. Our civil rights movement deserves an Easter. Now, I know Dr. King was not Jesus. He didn't promise I'll rise again. Oh, but he made a promise, I'll meet you in the promised land. And we have that eschatological expectation to meet him there one day. But until we get there, we've got work to do. And the Easter of the civil rights movement will take place when we rise up together on our own 2 feet. We got to rise up together and fight for the poor, fight for justice, fight for equality, fight for a better education, and fight for safety in our schools. Are we going to rise up or sit back and watch, complain, laugh, and wonder what went wrong with America? The choice is ours, and the time is now. Right now.
Amen.
Rise up.
Yes.
We need you. Rise up. Our children need you. What will you do?
We want to be conscious of the time. It's getting pretty late here tonight. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you to everyone who shared. Let's give them all another round of applause. We want to give just a little bit of time, a few minutes. If you got a question or two for anybody up here, I don't know if people come up or take a microphone. You got microphones back there. But yeah, we'll take a few questions up here and I'll get out of the way.
So, and I want to make this quick, but in 1968, I met someone, and she was in the Poor People's Campaign. I never heard of it. She was from a suburban area. I was from the ghetto kind of thing. So, but she told me about it. And so it wasn't a real thing for me because she got to go, and when she talked about it, it was fun, and it was that kind of, but it wasn't what I was dealing with. So the only thing I want to say, and I know we only have a couple minutes, is that my question for this year, and the one that you're doing now, I'm aware, and I'm going to share this, there's something called H.R. 1242, and it's a law as of January 8th. Next year is the 400-year anniversary of Africans coming to this country in slavery. So it's a law across the country. It's not an act. It's a law that for the whole 2019, that activities are to happen specifically around African Americans. And so I'm hoping that the group, that somehow I'm looking at your agenda, but I used to do grant writing, and when you have too much on it, it get like a lot of stuff don't get done. I'm hoping it doesn't get lost in the fray of things, and so I don't know if there's a place for that. Also, real quickly, there's a resolution from the United Nations that there's international decade, 10 years to focus on the injustices for African Americans across the globe, which means we have as a community 10 years to do some repair and some healing on what happened to us so we can be better even to be a part of a group. So it's not designed to separate, but I'm just hoping it doesn't get lost because the problem is in 2020, the congressman said that's going away in this country, and that's it. So we don't use our time next year for that. They're not going to do anything after that. If we don't use these 10 years, after that, it's over. So in terms of us being better participants, I'm just asking, is there a place in there not to forget this? Because it sounds good, but I ask people, the decade started in 2015. So the black community for the last 4 years have been doing something else. So this looks good. I'm just mindful, is there some place to fit the fact that we have a whole, and this is, and the United Nations one, it's not just for African Americans, for every African person on the planet, because we all been wounded, damaged, and working behind, and we're like maladjusted all the way around. So the time we need to spend doing that, is there a place without any offense coming, like we're separating out or this particular issue is highlighted? I know a bit about DACA, I know a bit about the immigrants, but I'm looking at the agenda, and I'm not saying that there's some open heaven for people of black African descent on the planet to do some stuff, even down to textbooks over the next few years. Is that too much intensity in this group, or is this something like a separate kind of thing, if you know what I'm asking?
I'll make my answer really quick. So the Poor People's Campaign for a Call for More Revival is geared again to bring people across all ethnic backgrounds. And so in May begins our 40 days of nonviolent moral fusion direct action. And then from there, we move forward, because this isn't a one-time thing, a flash in the pan thing. We understand that this is a 20-year, 30-year, ongoing some work to do. And so there is space for us to work those things out. Like you said, that initiative started in 2015. And again, I ask you all not to be a passive observer. And if there is something that you want to bring, that's what a movement is about. Go ahead and bring that. The space is there.
Here, I really have a statement or a request since we have people here. I'm part of a tutoring program here at Progressive, and this is one of the opportunities I think we would have to have make an effect or make a difference, is any of us do the volunteering at the schools. Even if it's just one day a month, that would make such a big difference to the children's lives. And that's what I'm asking people to do. Even if you can't do it yourself, you're at work or whatever, after school programs, if you know of someone, encourage them to do those things.
That is a good point to raise, especially when it comes to education of our kids. The Poor People's Campaign can truly take on the education in that form of volunteerism, because by us just being in the school makes a difference. especially as volunteers. They know we're giving up our free time to be there, and the kids love to see us in their schools. And I think that'd be something we can add to the means of the Poor People's Campaign for those who can't get out and march, those who don't want to do civil disobedience, those who don't want to go to jail. Perhaps they can go to school, tutor, teach, even just be there in the morning and say, good morning, kids, we love you, have a good day. That all helps those children, our children. And that could be a part of our movement, especially if we want to help the poor. We got to be where they are, and a lot of them in the schools. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Amen, amen. We do, again, we thank God for each and every one of you all. Again, we want to be respectful of your time, but did you not get information on tonight? How was tonight for you? Amen. Again, Dr. King meant so much to each and every one of us, to this country. And again, we have to continue to strive for that justice for all people. Want to share with you all the Poor People's Campaign. If you did get one of these forms, please leave it back in the back, turn it in. There were some other deals up there about the agenda and other things that's going on. If you would come and see my brother here, explain that to you, as well as Pastor Shenk. Can we give another round for what she's done? Her book is out there. She has a book. She'll be out there to autograph it and things for you. If you have other questions and stuff, please, you have the opportunity to share with her, to share with Darrell and others. We thank God again for all of you. We're going to close on this note because I'm going to ask Pastor Shaw and Steve if they would take their place. I believe we all have a mandate, a calling, a purpose to, first of all, love and support one another, but most of all, to connect with a God that loves all people and cares not that even one should perish. And in order for us to move to a place of justice and equality for all people, we need the Lord to order our steps. We can't do it on our own. I believe the reason why God used a pastor preacher to move to lead that civil rights movement is because we can't do it without him. So as Pastor Shaw shares with us, my brothers and sisters, allow the Lord to order your step.
Yes.
Allow the Lord to lead you, and let us stop tolerating one another and move beyond tolerance. Amen? Amen. After this song, you'll be dismissed. We'll have a closing benediction, and then you'll be dismissed.
Let the words of my mouth be a
Shall we stand? If you would, take somebody by the hand. Father, we thank you and we bless you. We thank you for what our ears have heard on tonight. We thank you for what our eyes beheld. Lord, we thank you for what our hearts feel right now. We ask, Lord, that the feeling in which we have right now, the thoughts that are going through our minds, Lord, that they do not fade away. But Lord, we would take action, that we will allow you to order our steps for the betterment of your people, that we will carry your word, your love, and your compassion to the farthest corners of this earth. Lord God, we thank you for what you're doing in the state of Kansas and the city of Wichita.
Thank you,
We
Lord.
ask, Lord, that we would be the catalyst, we will be the nucleus, we will be the example for a dark and dying world. What it means to love one another, regardless of race, color, creed, sexual orientation, or anything else that we have built up to separate us. For Lord, we know that you love all that you have created.
Yes, God.
So help us to be a better people. Help us, Lord, to move in a direction that will give you glory and give you honor. And now I say unto him, who is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all we can ever ask or even think, according to the great power that worketh within us, to him be dominion and power henceforth now and even until forevermore. And let all of the people of God, the warriors of God, those that love the word of God, say together, amen? Amen. 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 God bless you and God keep you.
Praise God, I hear you. God bless you. In all things in due season. Thank you.